The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden platform, and Ophelia Dawson clutched the locket at her throat so tightly the gold edges bit into her palm, wondering if she had made the greatest mistake of her life coming all this way to marry a stranger. Elko, Nevada sprawled before her in the afternoon sun of August 1882. A collection of buildings that seemed to cling to the earth as if one good windstorm might scatter them across the desert. Dust hung in the air like a veil, and the heat pressed against her skin even through the layers of her traveling dress. She had left Philadelphia 3 weeks ago with nothing but 2 trunks, a carpetbag, and the memories contained in the silver locket that never left her neck. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand. Ophelia took it, her legs unsteady after days of rattling across the country, and stepped down onto Nevada soil. The platform was crowded with people meeting the stage, but her eyes searched for one man in particular, Samuel Kerrigan. She had his letter folded in her reticule, written in a bold, slanting hand that promised honesty, hard work, and a good home. He had not promised love. That had been fine with Ophelia. She was not looking for love. Love had already found her once and left her with nothing but grief and a piece of jewelry she could not bear to remove. "Miss Dawson." A voice cut through her thoughts, deep and careful. She turned and found herself looking up into a pair of gray eyes set in a face that spoke of sun and wind and years, spent working the land. Samuel Kerrigan stood perhaps 6 feet tall, broad in the shoulders, with dark brown hair that touched his collar and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the mountains visible in the distance. He was perhaps 28 or 29, she guessed, and there was something steady in his gaze that made her breath catch slightly. "Mr. Kerrigan," she said, extending her gloved hand. "Yes, I am Ophelia Dawson." He took her hand gently, his own rough and calloused even through the leather of her glove. "Welcome to Elko. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, "but I am here now." His eyes moved past her to the coach where the driver was already unloading luggage. "Those yours? The 2 brown trunks and the carpetbag, yes." Samuel nodded and moved to collect them, lifting both trunks as if they weighed nothing. Another man might have hired help, but she appreciated that he simply did what needed doing. She picked up the carpetbag herself and followed him to a wagon waiting at the edge of the platform. The town moved around them with the purposeful chaos of late afternoon. Men led horses to the livery. Women carried baskets from the general store. A group of children raced past, kicking up dust and laughing. It was both foreign and familiar, this frontier town so different from the brick and cobblestone streets she had left behind. Samuel loaded her belongings into the wagon bed and then turned to her. "I thought we could stop by the preacher's house before heading out to the ranch, unless you need time to rest first." The preacher's house. The wedding. Ophelia's hand went to the locket again, a habit she had developed in the month since Thomas died. "Today." "That was the plan in the letters," Samuel said carefully. "But if you have changed your mind or if you need time, I understand. This is a big step." She studied his face, looking for signs of impatience or anger, but found only a kind of patient waiting. "No," she said softly. "Today is fine. I came here to marry you, Mr. Kerrigan. I see no reason to delay." Something flickered in his eyes, but he only nodded. "Samuel," he said. "You should call me Samuel." "Ophelia," she replied. "Ophelia," he repeated, and her name sounded different in his mouth, shaped by the western drawl that softened his consonants. They rode through town in the wagon, and Samuel pointed out various buildings. The general store run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. The saloon where he said he rarely went, but where trouble sometimes started. The church with its white steeple. The school that served the ranching families in the area. And finally, a small house behind the church where Reverend Walsh lived with his wife. The Reverend was a thin man with kind eyes and a shock of white hair, despite appearing to be only in his early 50s. His wife, a plump woman with flour on her apron, insisted they at least have some water before the ceremony. "You must be parched from your journey, Mrs. Walsh said, pressing a cup into Ophelia's hands. "And nervous too, I would imagine. But Samuel is a good man, one of the best. You will be well cared for." Ophelia drank the water and tried to steady her breathing. In less than an hour she would be married to a man she had met 30 minutes ago. The locket felt heavy against her skin. The ceremony was simple. They stood in the Reverend's small parlor with Mrs. Walsh and a neighbor as witnesses. Samuel spoke his vows in that steady voice, promising to honor and protect her. When it came Ophelia's turn, she faltered only slightly before promising to be a faithful wife. The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Samuel kissed her cheek with such gentleness that tears sprang to her eyes. They signed the register. Mrs. Walsh hugged her and told her to come to the ladies' social on Thursday afternoons if she wanted to meet the other women in the area. And then they were back in the wagon, heading out of town as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The ranch was 6 miles from Elko, following a road that wound through scrubland dotted with sage and the occasional juniper. Samuel drove in silence for the first mile, and Ophelia watched the landscape change as they left the town behind. The mountains seemed closer out here, purple in the fading light. "I should tell you about the ranch," Samuel finally said. "It is not large, but it is mine. Well, ours now, I suppose. I run cattle, about 200 head currently. There is a house, a barn, a good well. I have a man who helps with the heavy work, name of Jack Wheeler. He has a small cabin on the property but mostly keeps to himself. You will have the house to yourself during the day while I am working." "It sounds fine," Ophelia said. "It is not Philadelphia," Samuel said, glancing at her. "I know that from your letters. You will find it lonely at first, maybe. But there are neighbors within riding distance, and the town is close enough for Sundays, and when supplies are needed." "I did not leave Philadelphia looking for more of the same," Ophelia replied quietly. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "What were you looking for?" She considered the question, her fingers worrying the locket. "A new beginning," she said finally. "A chance to be someone different than who I was." He nodded as if he understood, though he did not ask her to explain further. The house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a single-story structure, larger than she had expected, built of wood that had weathered to a soft gray. A porch wrapped around the front, and there were real glass windows, 4 of them that she could see. Beside it stood a barn, and beyond that, corrals where cattle moved in the dusk. The whole scene was painted in shades of gold and shadow, and something about it made Ophelia's chest tighten. Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, coming around to help her. His hand circled her waist, and he lifted her as easily as he had lifted her trunks. For a moment she was suspended in the air, close enough to see the darker ring around the gray of his eyes, and then her feet touched the ground. "Welcome home," he said. The word caught her off guard. Home. She had not had one of those in a long time. Inside, the house was neat and sparse. A main room served as kitchen and living area with a cook stove, a table with 4 chairs and 2 armchairs near a fireplace. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean but simple, the home of a man who lived alone and saw no need for decoration. Samuel carried her trunks inside and set them down. "The bedroom on the right is mine," he said. "The one on the left I have prepared for you. I thought, given the circumstances, you might prefer your own space, at least for now." Ophelia felt relief wash through her so strongly she had to steady herself against the table. "Thank you," she said. "That is very considerate." "We are strangers," Samuel said simply. "The paper says we are married, but that does not mean you owe me anything you are not ready to give. I am a patient man, Ophelia." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He showed her to the bedroom, which contained a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a small window that looked out toward the mountains. It was plain but clean, and the bed looked infinitely inviting after weeks of traveling. "I will bring in your things," Samuel said. "There is water in the pitcher. Supper will be ready in about an hour if you want to rest and freshen up." He left her alone, and Ophelia sank onto the bed, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and emotion. She was married to a stranger in Nevada. The reality of what she had done threatened to overwhelm her, and she pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. After a moment, she stood and went to the washstand, pouring water into the basin. She washed her face and hands, removed her traveling dress, and changed into something simpler. Then she sat at the dresser and unpinned her dark hair, brushing it out and twisting it into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. The locket gleamed against the bodice of her dress. She lifted it, opened it with the small catch, and looked at the photograph inside. Thomas stared back at her, forever 22, forever smiling that crooked smile that had first caught her attention. Her throat tightened. "I am sorry," she whispered to the photograph, "but I could not stay there. Not with everyone looking at me with pity. Not with your mother blaming me. I had to leave." She closed the locket and tucked it back beneath her collar, then went to join Samuel for supper. He had made a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and bacon. They ate in silence at first, the awkwardness of new marriage settling over them like a blanket. But finally, Samuel cleared his throat. "Tell me about Philadelphia," he said. "What was your life like there?" Ophelia chose her words carefully. "I worked as a seamstress," she said. "My father was a clerk who died when I was 16. My mother passed 2 years later. I had no siblings, so I made my own way. The work was steady, and I had a small room in a boarding house." "Sounds lonely," Samuel observed. "It was," she admitted. "That is part of why I answered your advertisement. I wanted something more. A real home. A family, perhaps, someday." "I want those things too," Samuel said. "I have built this ranch from nothing over the past 6 years, but a ranch is not a home without someone to share it with. I am 30 years old and tired of eating supper alone." 30. She had guessed close. She was 24 herself, though sometimes she felt much older. "How did you come to be here?" she asked. "In Nevada. I grew up in Missouri," Samuel said. "My father had a farm, but there were 4 sons and only enough land for one. I headed west when I was 19, worked cattle drives for a few years, saved my money. When I had enough, I bought this land and started building. It has been slow but good." "Do you miss Missouri?" he considered. "Sometimes. I miss my family, but I was never going to be my own man there. Here I have that. What I make of this place is up to me." After supper, Samuel insisted on washing the dishes while Ophelia dried. They worked side by side at the basin, and she found herself studying him in the lamplight. His hands were scarred and rough, the hands of a working man, but they moved with care as he washed each plate, each fork. "You should get some rest," he said when they finished. "Tomorrow I will show you around properly, introduce you to Jack, show you where everything is." "What time do you rise?" she asked. "Before dawn, usually, but you sleep as long as you need. You must be exhausted." She was bone deep and soul weary. "Thank you, Samuel, for everything, for your kindness." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something in his expression that might have been loneliness matching her own. "We will figure this out," he said quietly, "one day at a time." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Nevada night, Ophelia clutched the locket and let herself cry silently. She cried for Thomas, for the life they were supposed to have had, for the baby she had lost 3 months before he died. She cried for the loneliness and the fear and the desperate hope that had brought her across the country to marry a stranger, and when the tears finally stopped, she slept. The days developed a rhythm. Samuel rose before dawn and went out to work the ranch. Ophelia woke later and found breakfast left warming on the stove for her, simple but filling. She spent her mornings learning the house, exploring what supplies were available, planning what might be needed from town. In the afternoons, she began to venture outside, first just to the porch, then to the yard, then further. Jack Wheeler was a weathered man of perhaps 50 with a limp and few words. He tipped his hat to her when Samuel introduced them but seemed to have no interest in conversation. That suited Ophelia fine. She was not ready for questions. Samuel came in for midday dinner and they ate together, gradually learning to talk to each other. He asked her about sewing, and she found herself describing the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from fabric and thread. She asked him about the cattle, and he explained the work of managing a herd in this dry country, the constant search for good grazing, the watch for predators and disease. They were careful with each other, polite, like two people walking on ice and uncertain of its strength. A week after her arrival, Ophelia was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard Samuel approach. She had washed his shirts, her own dresses, the bed linens. The physical work felt good after so much sitting. "You do not have to do all that," Samuel said, coming to stand beside her. "I have been managing my own washing." "I do not mind," Ophelia said, pinning one of his shirts to the line. "I like having something useful to do." "You are not here to be my housekeeper," Samuel said quietly. She turned to look at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "What am I here to be? My wife," he said. "My partner, an equal." "I am not sure I know how to be those things," she admitted. "Neither do I," Samuel said. "I have never been married before, but I figure we will learn together." It was evening a few days later when Samuel finally asked about the locket. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Ophelia had brought out coffee, and they sat in the 2 chairs Samuel had built, the silence between them comfortable now instead of awkward. "You touch that locket a lot," Samuel said, his voice gentle. "It must be important to you." Ophelia's hand went to it automatically. She had known this conversation would come eventually. "It is," she said. "Is it your mother's or your father's?" She shook her head. "It belonged to someone else, someone I knew before I came here." Samuel waited, not pushing, and perhaps that was what made her continue. "His name was Thomas," she said quietly. "Thomas Reid. We were engaged to be married. He was a clerk at a shipping company, and we met when I went to deliver a dress for his employer's wife. He had a kind smile and gentle ways. We courted for 6 months before he asked me to marry him." "What happened?" Samuel asked. "There was an accident at the docks," Ophelia said, staring out at the sunset. "A loading crane collapsed. Thomas was crushed. He died instantly, they told me. He did not suffer." The words came out flat, recited so many times they had lost their sharp edges. "That was a year and a half ago." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry," he said finally. "That must have been terrible." "What was worse was after," Ophelia said. "His mother blamed me. Said if he had not been working extra to save money for our wedding, he would not have been there that day. People at church looked at me with pity. The other girls I knew did not know what to say to me. I became the tragic figure, the girl whose fiancé died. I could not bear it anymore. When I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps I could start over, be someone different, but I could not leave him behind entirely. She touched the locket. His photograph is in here. Samuel set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Ophelia, I need you to understand something. Your past made you who you are. That man, Thomas, he was part of your life. Loving him does not make you less able to be here now. You do not have to hide that locket or feel ashamed of your grief. She felt tears spring to her eyes. You are not angry. That I came here still mourning another man. Angry. Samuel shook his head. No. How could I be angry at you for having a heart capable of deep love? That only tells me you are a woman who loves truly. Any man would be lucky to earn that kind of devotion. But we are married, Ophelia said. And I do not know if I can ever feel that way again. I do not know if I have that to give. Samuel reached over and took her hand, his rough fingers gentle around hers. I did not ask you to love me when I wrote those letters. I asked you to be my wife, to build a life with me. If love comes, that will be a gift, but it is not a requirement. I would rather have your honest companionship than false affection. You are a good man, Samuel Kerrigan, Ophelia whispered. I try to be, he said. And I want you to know that you can talk about Thomas if you need to. I am not threatened by a memory. He was real and he mattered to you. That is nothing to hide. That night, for the first time since arriving, Ophelia did not cry herself to sleep. Instead, she lay in bed feeling something like peace settle over her. The following Thursday, Samuel drove her into town for the ladies' social at Mrs. Walsh's house. Ophelia wore her best dress and tried not to feel nervous as they pulled up in front of the small house behind the church. I will be at the general store, Samuel said. Come find me when you are ready to leave. Mrs. Walsh welcomed her warmly, and Ophelia found herself in a parlor with 7 other women ranging in age from early 20s to perhaps 60. They were ranchers' wives, the schoolteacher, the doctor's wife, and the woman who ran the boarding house in town. The questions came fast. Where was she from? How did she like Nevada? Was the ranch house comfortable? Did she know how to preserve vegetables because the growing season was short out here? The attention was overwhelming but not unkind. A woman named Ruth, perhaps 26 with laugh lines around her eyes, took pity on her. Leave her be, she said to the others. She just got here. Give her time to breathe. Ruth sat beside Ophelia on the sofa and lowered her voice. They mean well, but they can be a lot. I am Ruth Spencer. My husband has the ranch east of Samuel's place. Ophelia Kerrigan, Ophelia said, the new name still strange in her mouth. How are you really doing? Ruth asked. It must be strange coming all this way to marry a stranger. Ophelia considered lying but found she did not want to. It is strange, she admitted. But Samuel is kind. I think it will be all right. Samuel is one of the best men I know, Ruth said. My Tom speaks highly of him. Says he is honest and fair and works harder than any 2 men. You could have done much worse. Did you come here as a mail-order bride too? Ophelia asked. Ruth laughed. No, I was born here. Well, in California originally, but my family came to Nevada when I was 5. I have known Tom my whole life. We grew up together. She leaned closer. But I will tell you a secret. Even knowing him all that time, marriage was still an adjustment. It takes time to learn to live with another person, to understand their ways. Do not expect it all to be perfect right away. The advice settled something in Ophelia's chest. Thank you, she said. I will try to remember that. The social was actually pleasant once Ophelia relaxed. The women shared recipes and gossip, talked about children and husbands and the challenges of frontier life. No one asked prying questions about her past, and for that she was grateful. When she found Samuel at the general store later, he was loading supplies into the wagon. How was it? He asked. Good, she said, surprised to find she meant it. The women were kind. I am glad, Samuel said. I know it is not easy being the newcomer." On the ride home, Ophelia found herself telling him about the women she had met, about Ruth and her husband Tom. Samuel listened and occasionally added information, filling in details about the families and the connections between them. "Tom Spencer is a good man," Samuel said. "His ranch borders mine to the east. We help each other out during branding season and when either of us needs extra hands for something big." "Ruth said her husband speaks well of you," Ophelia said. Samuel glanced at her, a slight smile touching his lips. "Tom is generous with his praise." As August turned to September, the heat began to ease slightly, and Ophelia settled more deeply into the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to manage the chickens Samuel kept, gathering eggs each morning and throwing feed to the hens. She learned which plants grew wild nearby and could be eaten or used for medicine. She learned the sound of Samuel's footsteps, the rhythm of his work, the particular way he cleared his throat when he was thinking about something difficult. And slowly, carefully, she began to heal. One evening, as they sat together after supper, Ophelia found herself telling Samuel about the baby. She had not meant to. The words simply came out. "I was pregnant when Thomas died," she said quietly. 2 months along, we had not told anyone yet. We were waiting. Samuel's hand found hers across the table. "I lost the baby a month after the accident," Ophelia continued. "The doctor said it was the shock and grief. Thomas's mother said it was God's judgment, that I had been sinful to let him touch me before we were married." She laughed bitterly. "We were engaged. We were going to be married in 3 months, but to her I was a fallen woman who deserved what I got." "That is cruel," Samuel said, his voice tight with anger, "and wrong." "I started to believe her," Ophelia whispered. "I thought maybe I was being punished for being happy, for loving him, for wanting a life." "Look at me," Samuel said, and she raised her eyes to his. "You are not being punished. Terrible things happen sometimes and there is no reason for them. They just happen. You lost someone you loved and a child you wanted. That is tragedy, not judgment." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "Because I know something about loss," Samuel said. "I had a sister, younger than me by 4 years, Sarah. She was beautiful and smart and full of life. When she was 16, she got sick, fever. She died in 3 days. My mother said it was God's will, that he needed another angel, but I could never accept that. Why would God need my sister more than we did? Sometimes there is no reason. Sometimes life is just hard and unfair." "I am sorry about your sister," Ophelia said. "And I am sorry about Thomas and your baby," Samuel replied. "You have carried a lot of grief, Ophelia. No wonder you needed to leave and start over." She wiped at her eyes. "Thank you for understanding." "We all have pasts," Samuel said. "Things that shaped us, made us who we are. I would not want you to be anyone different than who you are right now." As autumn settled over Nevada, the landscape transformed. The heat broke, replaced by cool mornings and comfortable days. The cattle were driven to lower pastures. Samuel and Jack worked long hours preparing for winter, repairing fences, stocking feed, making sure the barn was tight against the cold that would come. Ophelia threw herself into her own preparations. She learned to preserve the vegetables from the small garden behind the house. She sewed warmer clothes for both herself and Samuel. She made curtains for the windows and a new quilt for her bed, and she found herself watching Samuel more. The way he moved, efficient and strong. The way he spoke to his horse with gentle authority. The way he came in from a long day's work, tired but satisfied. He was a good man, she thought. An honest man. The kind of man who kept his promises. One October afternoon, Ruth Spencer came to visit, riding over with a basket of apples from her trees. "I thought you might want some for pies," she said. And truthfully, I wanted an excuse to get away from my house for a bit. Tom's brother is visiting, and he talks too much." Ophelia laughed and welcomed her inside, putting on coffee while Ruth settled at the table. They had become friends over the past weeks, visiting back and forth when they could. "How are you settling in?" Ruth asked. "Really, better than I expected," Ophelia admitted. "Samuel is easy to live with. He is patient and kind," Ruth grinned. "And handsome too, if you ask me." Tom says half the unmarried women in the county were disappointed when Samuel sent off for a mail-order bride. Ophelia felt her cheeks warm. "I had not thought about that." "Well, it is true," Ruth said. "But Samuel always kept to himself, never showed interest in any of the local girls. I think he wanted someone who did not know his business already, who would not have expectations." "We still barely know each other," Ophelia said. "But you are getting there," Ruth said. "I can see it in how you talk about him. You care about him." Did she? Ophelia considered the question. She cared about Samuel's comfort, his happiness. She liked talking to him. She respected him. Was that caring? Or was it something more? "It is different than I thought it would be," Ophelia said finally. "Being married to him, I expected it to feel like a business arrangement. But it feels like more than that." "That is because it is more than that," Ruth said gently. "You are building a life together. That means something." After Ruth left, Ophelia found herself thinking about her friend's words. She was building a life with Samuel. When had that happened? When had this stopped being temporary, a refuge, and started feeling like something permanent? That night, as they sat on the porch in the cool evening air, Ophelia asked Samuel about his plans for the ranch. "I want to expand," he said. "Add another 100 head of cattle if I can manage it. Maybe build a bigger barn. Eventually, I would like to have the best beef cattle in this part of Nevada." "That is a good dream," Ophelia said. "What about you?" Samuel asked. "What do you dream about?" She touched the locket, thinking. "I used to dream about a house in Philadelphia. A yard for children to play in, a husband who came home at 5 o'clock. But that seems like someone else's dream now." "What do you dream about now?" he pressed gently. "I dream about belonging somewhere," she said slowly. "About having a place that is mine, about mattering to someone." She paused. "I think I might be starting to find that here." Samuel reached over and took her hand, and they sat in silence as the stars came out overhead. November brought cold and the first dusting of snow on the mountains. Samuel taught Ophelia to ride, starting her on his most gentle mare. At first she was terrified, but gradually she learned to trust the horse and her own balance. There was freedom in riding, a sense of possibility that she had never felt in the cramped streets of Philadelphia. They rode together sometimes in the late afternoons when Samuel's work was done. He showed her the boundaries of the ranch, pointed out landmarks, taught her to read the land. She asked questions, and he answered patiently, clearly pleased by her interest. "You are a good teacher," she told him one day as they sat on their horses overlooking a small valley where some of his cattle grazed. "You are a good student," he replied. "You ask smart questions." "I want to understand this place," Ophelia said. "I want to feel like I belong here, not like I am just visiting." "You do belong here," Samuel said firmly. "This is your home as much as it is mine." She looked at him, this man who had taken her in when she was running from grief, who had asked nothing of her except her honest presence. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a chance to start over." "Thank you for taking that chance," he replied. As they rode back toward the house, Ophelia realized something had shifted in her chest. The tight knot of grief that had lived there for so long had loosened. She still missed Thomas. She still mourned the life she had lost, but it no longer defined her every moment. Thanksgiving came, and to Ophelia's surprise, Samuel invited Tom and Ruth Spencer to join them for dinner. "I thought you might like the company," he said. And Tom has been a good friend to me. I want to thank him." Ophelia threw herself into preparations, determined to show Samuel that she could manage a proper dinner. She roasted a chicken, made cornbread dressing, baked pies from Ruth's apples. The house smelled wonderful, and when their guests arrived, Ruth hugged her and declared the spread magnificent. The four of them ate together at the table Samuel had extended with extra boards. The conversation flowed easily, touching on ranching, weather, town gossip, and plans for the winter. Ophelia found herself laughing at Tom's stories, enjoying Ruth's sharp observations. After dinner, while Ruth helped her clean up, the other woman said quietly, "You and Samuel are good together. You fit." "You think so?" Ophelia asked. "I know so," Ruth said. "I see the way he looks at you when you are not paying attention. That man is falling in love with you, Ophelia Kerrigan, whether he knows it yet or not." Ophelia's hand stilled in the dishwater. "He has never said anything like that." "Because he is being patient," Ruth said. "Waiting for you to be ready. But trust me, I know what love looks like." That night, after Tom and Ruth left, Ophelia lay in bed thinking about her friend's words. Was Samuel falling in love with her? And more importantly, what did she feel for him? She cared about him. That much was certain. She enjoyed his company, respected his character, appreciated his kindness. When he smiled at her, something warm bloomed in her chest. When he was away for long hours, she found herself listening for the sound of his return. Was that love? Or was it simply affection born of proximity and gratitude? The question haunted her through the following days. She found herself watching Samuel more carefully, looking for signs of what he felt. And she saw things she had missed before. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her. The way he found excuses to be near her, to touch her hand or brush past her in the kitchen. The way he seemed to cherish every piece of herself that she shared with him. December arrived with serious cold and snow that dusted the valley. Samuel spent more time in the barn, caring for the animals, making sure they were warm and fed. Ophelia bundled up and helped when she could, learning to fork hay and break ice on water troughs. One evening, as they worked together in the barn, Samuel suddenly said, "You have snow in your hair." Ophelia reached up and he caught her hand. "Let me," he said. He stepped close, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cold barn. Gently he brushed the snow from her hair, his fingers tender. She looked up at him and their eyes met. "Ophelia," he said softly. "I need to tell you something," her heart hammered. "What is it?" "I know we married for practical reasons," Samuel said. "I know you came here running from grief, looking for a new start, and I have tried to respect that, to give you space and time, but I cannot hide anymore what I feel." "Samuel," she whispered. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Maybe I have been since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach with your chin up and fear in your eyes, trying to be brave. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you laugh at Tom's terrible jokes, the way you have made my house into a home. I love you, Ophelia, and I needed you to know." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I do not know if I can love you back the way you deserve," she said. "I am still carrying so much grief." "I know," Samuel said, "and I am not asking you to stop grieving. I am not asking you to forget Thomas or pretend he did not matter. I am just telling you what is in my heart. What you do with that information is up to you." He stepped back, giving her space, and returned to pitching hay. Ophelia stood frozen, her mind spinning. That night she took out the locket and opened it, looking at Thomas's photograph in the lamplight. "I think I am falling in love with someone else," she whispered to the image. "I did not mean to, I did not think I could, but he is so good, Thomas, so patient and kind. What do I do?" The photograph, of course, had no answer. But as Ophelia stared at it, she realized something. Thomas would not have wanted her to stop living. He had loved her, yes. He had wanted to marry her and build a life with her. But he was gone, and she was still here. "I will always love you," she told the photograph. "You will always be part of my story, but I think it is time for me to write new chapters." She closed the locket and sat for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision. Then she stood, walked to her door, and opened it. Samuel was sitting in one of the armchairs by the fire, reading a book. He looked up when she emerged, surprise and hope warring in his expression. "I cannot promise you everything," Ophelia said. "I cannot promise that I will not still grieve sometimes. I cannot promise that my heart is whole and perfect, but I can promise that I want to try. I want to build a real marriage with you, Samuel. I want to see where this goes." He set down his book and stood. "That is all I ask. Just a chance." She crossed the room and stood before him. "I think I might be falling in love with you too," she said softly. "It terrifies me, but I think it might be true." Samuel cupped her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her softly, tenderly, as if she were precious and fragile. And Ophelia felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked away since Thomas died. It was not forgetting. It was not betrayal. It was simply allowing herself to feel again, to want again, to hope again. When they parted, she rested her head against his chest and his arms came around her. They stood like that for a long time, swaying slightly, learning the shape of each other. "We can take this as slowly as you need," Samuel murmured into her hair. "There is no rush." "I know," Ophelia said. "But I do not want to sleep alone anymore. Will you hold me tonight?" "I would be honored," he said. They went to his room together, and Ophelia lay down in his bed for the first time. Samuel lay beside her, fully clothed, and simply held her. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and sure. Christmas came, and Samuel surprised her with gifts. A new riding jacket, perfectly sized, a book of poetry he had ordered from the catalog, and a small wooden box he had carved himself, decorated with her initials. "For your treasures," he said. "Whatever you want to keep safe." She cried and kissed him, overcome by his thoughtfulness. Her gifts for him seemed poor in comparison: a new shirt she had sewn, socks she had knitted, a scarf, but he received them as if they were gold. They spent the day quietly, just the two of them, cooking together and talking. In the evening, Ophelia did something she had not expected to do. She took off the locket and placed it in the wooden box Samuel had made. "I am not forgetting," she said as he watched. "But I do not need to carry it all the time anymore. It will be safe here." Samuel kissed her forehead. "Your past made you who you are," he said, "but it does not have to be all you are." The new year of 1883 arrived with a fierce snowstorm that kept them mostly inside for 3 days. But Ophelia did not mind. She and Samuel played cards, read aloud to each other, cooked elaborate meals, and talked for hours. And on the second night, she came to him not just for comfort but for love. They made love slowly, carefully, Samuel constantly checking that she was comfortable, that she wanted this. And Ophelia found that her body still knew how to feel pleasure, that her heart still knew how to soar. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, she said, "I love you, Samuel Kerrigan." "I love you too, Ophelia," he replied. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." January and February passed in a haze of snow and domesticity. They were truly married now in every sense, partners in the work of the ranch and in their bed. Ophelia learned the pleasure of waking up beside someone, of small kisses throughout the day, of knowing she was loved. She still had moments of grief. Sometimes she would find herself thinking of Thomas, of the baby she had lost, and tears would come. But Samuel never begrudged her those tears. He simply held her and let her feel what she needed to feel. "Your grief does not threaten me," he told her once. "Love is not a finite resource. You can love me and still remember him. There is room in your heart for both." When March arrived and the snow began to melt, Ophelia realized something. She had missed her courses. Not once, but twice. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope. But when she missed a third time and began to feel queasy in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She wanted this baby desperately. But she was afraid too. What if she lost this one like she had lost the other? When she finally told Samuel, he went very still. "Are you sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor," she said. "I have all the signs." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happy." He pulled back to look at her. "Ophelia, I am over the moon, but I can see you are scared. Talk to me." She told him about the baby she had lost, about her fears that it might happen again. "What if my body cannot carry a child?" she whispered. "What if I lose this one too?" "Then we will face that together," Samuel said firmly. "But you cannot live in fear of what might happen. All we can do is hope and take care of you and this baby as best we can." He insisted she see the doctor in Elko. Dr. Morrison was a kindly man in his 50s who examined her and declared her in good health. "The baby you lost before," he said gently. "It was likely due to the trauma and stress you experienced. You are in a much better situation now. There is no reason to think you will not carry this child to term." The words lifted a weight from Ophelia's chest. She dared to hope. As spring unfolded across the Nevada landscape, Ophelia's belly began to swell. Samuel treated her as if she were made of glass, which sometimes annoyed her and sometimes made her laugh. But mostly she felt cherished. Ruth was thrilled when Ophelia told her. "I knew it," she crowed. "I knew you two were meant to be, and now a baby. Oh, I am so happy for you." The women of Elko rallied around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and offers to help when the time came. Ophelia found herself part of a community in a way she had never been in Philadelphia. Summer came hot and bright. Samuel hired an extra hand to help with the ranch work so he could spend more time near the house, wanting to be close in case Ophelia needed anything. She scolded him for hovering, but truthfully, she loved having him near. In August, as the heat reached its peak, Ophelia went into labor. Ruth came to help, along with Mrs. Walsh, who had experience as a midwife. Samuel paced outside the bedroom, too nervous to sit still. The labor was long and hard, but when Ophelia finally heard her baby's first cry, every moment of pain was forgotten. Mrs. Walsh cleaned the infant and placed him in Ophelia's arms. "A son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful son." Samuel came in, his face pale with worry, and stopped short when he saw them. Ophelia looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "We have a son," she said. He came to the bed and looked down at the baby with wonder. "He is perfect," Samuel breathed. "You are amazing. Thank you." They named him Samuel Thomas Kerrigan, honoring both his father and the man who had come before. When Ruth asked about the middle name, Ophelia said simply, "For someone who will always be part of our story." Samuel held her hand and nodded, understanding in his eyes. The days after the baby's birth were exhausting and wonderful. Ophelia learned to nurse, to soothe, to survive on little sleep. Samuel helped however he could, changing diapers and walking with the baby at night so Ophelia could rest. "You are a good father," Ophelia told him one night as she watched him rock their son. "I am learning," Samuel said. "Same as you are learning to be a mother. We will figure it out together." Fall came again, and with it the 1-year anniversary of Ophelia's arrival in Elko. On the day itself, Samuel surprised her by taking her into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, leaving the baby with Ruth. "Over steaks and wine," he said. "A year ago I watched you step off that stagecoach, and I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen, coming all this way, risking everything on a stranger." "I thought you looked honest," Ophelia said, "like someone I could trust." "I want you to know something," Samuel said seriously. "This has been the best year of my life. You have given me more than I ever dreamed of. A true partner, love, a son, a real family. I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement." "I thank God too," Ophelia said softly, "for sending me here, for giving me a second chance at happiness, for you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Here is to many more years together." "Many more," she agreed. As they drove home under the stars, baby Samuel sleeping peacefully between them, Ophelia reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, she had been running from grief, carrying her past like a weight around her neck. Now she was running toward something, a future, a family, a love that was different from what she had known before but no less real. The locket sat in its carved box at home, a treasured reminder but no longer a burden. Thomas would always be part of her story, but he was not the whole story anymore. Samuel Kerrigan had given her more than a home. He had given her permission to be whole again, to carry her past without being crushed by it, to love again without guilt. "Your past made you who you are," he had said, and he was right. Her grief and loss had shaped her, had made her strong enough to take a chance on a new life. But her future was hers to write, and she was writing it with Samuel, one day at a time. The years that followed were full and good. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Sarah after Samuel's sister and another son they called James. The ranch prospered. Samuel added the cattle and built the bigger barn he had dreamed of. Ophelia planted a real garden and became known throughout the county for her preserves and pies. They faced challenges, of course. A drought one year that tested their reserves. A harsh winter that killed some cattle. The normal struggles of raising children and managing a ranch. But they faced everything together as partners. Ruth remained Ophelia's closest friend, their children growing up together, running between the 2 ranches. Tom and Samuel became even closer, almost like brothers. The community in Elko embraced Ophelia fully, until she could hardly remember feeling like an outsider. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel presented her with a gift. It was a new locket, silver like the old one but larger. Inside were 3 photographs, one of each of their children. "I thought you might want this," he said, "to carry them with you always." Ophelia kissed him, deeply moved. That night, she opened the carved box and took out the old locket. She looked at Thomas's photograph one last time, then carefully closed it and placed it in the back of her dresser drawer. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory, "for teaching me how to love, for being part of my story. But this chapter is closed now." She put on the new locket and went to find Samuel. They made love that night with the passion of long familiarity, knowing exactly how to please each other, cherishing the life they had built. Afterward, Ophelia lay in Samuel's arms and felt completely at peace. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked sleepily. "Taking a chance on a mail-order bride?" "Never," Samuel said firmly. "You are the best decision I ever made." "Even though I came here broken, you were not broken," Samuel said. "You were grieving. There is a difference. And you brought all of yourself to me, your past, your pain, your strength, your capacity to love. How could I regret that?" Ophelia smiled in the darkness. "Your past made you who you are," she quoted his words back to him. "Exactly," he said, "and who you are is magnificent." As they drifted off to sleep, wrapped around each other as they had been every night for 10 years, Ophelia thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia to Nevada. From grief to joy. From running away to running toward. She had come to Elko as Ophelia Dawson, a woman fleeing her past, clutching a locket that held all her broken dreams. She had become Ophelia Kerrigan, a woman who had learned that it was possible to honor the past while embracing the future, to love again without forgetting who she had loved before. The locket had been a symbol of her grief, but also of her capacity for deep feeling. Samuel had understood that from the beginning. He had not asked her to forget or to pretend. He had simply loved her as she was and given her space to heal. And in healing, she had found a love even deeper than what she had known before. Because this love was built not just on passion and attraction, but on true partnership, on weathering storms together, on building something lasting and real. 20 years after she first arrived in Elko, Ophelia sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Samuel sat beside her, his hair now touched with silver, his face lined with the marks of sun and laughter. Their children were grown now. Samuel Thomas was working the ranch with his father, already talking about the day it would be his. Sarah had married a rancher from the next county, and they visited often with their 2 little ones. James was studying to be a doctor in San Francisco, but he wrote letters every week promising to return to Nevada when his training was complete. "We built a good life," Ophelia said, reaching for Samuel's hand. "We did," he agreed, lacing his fingers through hers, "and we are not done yet." "No," she smiled. "I suppose we are not." She thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived here, so young and scared and lost. If she could speak to that Ophelia now, what would she say? She would say that grief does not last forever, even when it feels like it will. She would say that it is possible to love again, differently but no less truly. She would say that the past shapes us but does not have to define us. Most of all, she would say that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be known, completely and honestly, by someone who sees us clearly and chooses to love us anyway. Samuel had done that for her, and she had done it for him in return. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ophelia leaned her head against Samuel's shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had learned each other so well that words were often unnecessary. The locket with Thomas's photograph still rested in her dresser drawer, a reminder of who she had been and what she had survived. But the locket at her throat held the faces of their children, the fruits of the love she and Samuel had built together. Both were precious. Both were part of her story. And she would not change a single chapter because every experience, every joy, and every sorrow had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Samuel replied. "Always have, always will." And as the night settled over the Nevada desert, peaceful and vast, Ophelia knew with complete certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her past had made her who she was, but her future, built with Samuel Kerrigan, was the greatest gift she had ever received. The ranch would continue. Their children would have children. The land would endure. And the love they had built together, forged in patience and understanding and the willingness to see each other truly, would be their lasting legacy. It was more than enough. It was everything.